We are very appreciative to have with us next Anna Golawski. Anna is an expert in mental toughness and leadership management and will be helping us to better understand how to thrive in stressful or high pressure situations. In what has been a stressful time in one way or another for us all, Anna will also look at how we can build resilience in order to handle things better in future.
Hello, my name is Anna Golawski and I'm the founder of Stratus Coaching based down here in Brighton. And I'm going to be talking today about how we handle pressure and stress in the workplace. Obviously, in these very challenging times, it's probably more prevalent than ever, but a lot of us all the time are handling various challenges, adversity, setbacks. So it's really important for us to understand how our minds work and how this can affect us, but also more importantly, what can we do to better handle the pressure and the stress? It's not going to go away even after coronavirus, even when things get back to normality, whatever that might be. We're still going to have stuff to deal with on a regular basis. So I'm going to be chatting to you about handling pressure and stress and how we can deal with it going forwards. I've been working in this area for coming up for 12 years now. Previous to that, I had various corporate jobs in HR and marketing, and I've been working with various clients over the past 12 years or so, looking at how we can build up resilience, deal with pressure, and just generally improve mental health and well-being. So I hope you find this useful. So let's see if I can share my screen. I've got a couple of slides to show you. So handling pressure and stress at work. So we're going to be thinking about what is stress. I mean, it's one of these words which is bandied around by everybody, but what really do we mean by stress? It's probably slightly overused and not always in its correct context. We're going to be thinking about the difference between pressure and stress. So why is it that sometimes we're under pressure, but actually we're absolutely thriving? We're working to our best, we're working to our deadline, we're being effective. Other times we can be under pressure and we just can't think straight. We can't see the wood for the trees. We have difficulty handling our emotions, being irritable, just coming up with solutions, ideas and stuff like that. So what is it that makes the difference? What are the triggers? But also really importantly, it's a self-awareness to know what is your own stress signature. So what is your signs that tell you that you're beginning not to cope as well as you'd like to be, so you can actually do something about it. So starting off on that, I always like to start off thinking about our mental health in general, because we all have mental health. We are on this spectrum of mental health, throughout the days, and this can be up and down, very much in the same way that our physical health can fluctuate and change. The key thing is to really think about whereabouts are you on the mental health spectrum so that you can intervene and do something and bounce back sooner rather than later. Again, it's a little bit like our physical health. So the sooner you notice that you're coming down with a cold or sore throat or something like that, you can rest, take paracetamol or vitamin C, whatever, and help yourself get back to feeling great and healthy again. So more specifically, what is stress? Because stress is obviously a key part of our mental health. It's now overtaken all other reasons for being off sick from work. According to latest statistics, it's a huge problem and increasing all the time. I think recently the figures have increased by millions in terms of the lost days at work, the cost of presenteeism, the cost of absenteeism and sickness-related absences is huge. So what is stress? So if we were going to Google stress, it will come up with round about 1.7 billion results. And when I was doing a similar presentation to this a couple of years ago, and I was Googling stress and the definition of stress, it came up with about 600 million results. So this is trebled in terms of the results that comes up. So, again, this is obviously something which is on people's radar. People are sort of trying to sort of, find out a lot more about it. The definition that I like to use with people is the one from the Stress Management Society, because it's not too clinical. It's really a situation where the demands on us exceed our ability to cope. It's exceeding our resources, it's exceeding our maybe expectations, it's testing our competence, it's draining us. It's that point where it is just absolutely too much. We just can't cope anymore at all with it. And I really like this definition, actually, and it just kind of link into the engineering definition of stress, which is the stress point of a piece of material, a piece of metal, for example. What point does it actually snap and it bends? And that's the key for us as well, really. Stress is the point that we get to where can't cope anymore and we've just kind of snapped. And stress is here to keep us safe, ultimately. We need this stress response to keep us out of danger. We don't want to, not have stress in our lives. We don't want to not have the stress response in our lives, because without that, we wouldn't be able to jump out of the way of a tiger. For instance, this is what we originally had stress for, to sort of, to keep us safe. But we're not always evolved for our environment, so it's not really appropriate or sustainable, or even sort of required, really, to actually sort of carry on in a very stressful state of being in the workplace. If every time that we thought someone was approaching us, they were going to attack us like a tiger, then we're going to be very anxious. It's really going to impact on our mental health and also our physical health as well. Stress, what happens to us when we're in a stressed situation is that our cortisol levels and our adrenaline levels rise. We get that sort of high alert state. We're on the lookout for the tiger, we're on the lookout for the animal that's about to attack us. Our blood sugars rise. We get loads more sort of blood rushing around our bodies, trying to give us that energy to run away. And you've probably heard of the phrase the fight or flight. There's also fight, flight or freeze. So either we choose to try and take flight and run away from the stressful situation, the tiger, whatever is about to attack us, or we might try and fight it off with whatever means that we can, or we're just so overwhelmed that we're just absolutely frozen to the spot. So it's the fight, flight or freeze that we can go into. Adrenaline and cortisol levels raise, blood pressure raises, a heart beats faster. It's trying to give us this extra oxygen, extra blood rushing around just to give us that energy to run away. You might have also noticed when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling anxious, that you get butterflies in your stomach. A lot of people talk about that kind of tension that they get in their stomach, and that's because our digestive system is trying to close down. So if your mind thinks that you're about to be attacked by a wild tiger and you need to run away from it, the last thing it wants you to do is to sit down and have a big Sunday lunch and then try and run away from the tiger. So what your body does is it has the butterflies to stop your digestive system sort of wanting to be hungry and eat food. Some people go the other way during stressful situations when they've been sort of feeling stressed for a long time. They reach for the comfort eating, the sort of the junk food, the sort of the cake, the chocolate, those kind of like things, as a way of coping with the stress symptoms that they're dealing with. The other thing that happens to us as well is our sleep patterns get really interrupted. Again, because if our mind thinks we're about to be attacked by a tiger, the last thing it wants us to do is take a little nap and relax and fall asleep. So if you notice that when you're feeling very stressed, that you can't switch off, you're very agitated, you're very sort of twitchy and you just can't sit down, that is because your body has got so much excess energy, it's preparing itself to fight off the tiger. It's on the lookout. The last thing it wants you to do is go to sleep. So that's why people say they either can't fall asleep in the evenings, they have real difficulty switching off, they might wake up in the middle of the night in that sort of panic mode, and they might wake up really early in the morning, again, immediately feeling very anxious. They're on the lookout, they're being very vigilant for the tiger. But what are the causes of stress? And I'm just going to sort of share my screen again with you. And as you can see from this diagram here on the screen, there's loads of different sources of stress and pressure out there. The one on the right-hand side there, world and society, at the moment, thinking about coronavirus and everything, it's a huge source of pressure on a global pandemic scale. We often hear about work-related stress, and this is something which I think gets a bit of a bad press. Again, sort of, thinking about the current situation, there's a lot of people saying at the minute that they're missing work. They're missing their teammates, that routine, that structure. So I think although we do get a lot of work-related stress, work isn't always the bad guy. If you've got great colleagues, a boss who's giving you sort of good work to do, empowering you, feedback, it's a healthy organisation, then actually going to work is generally much better for people's mental health than not being in work at all. Other source of stress and pressure is family and community, and also ourselves. We put a lot of perhaps undue pressure on ourselves and undue stress on ourselves to do the best that we can, to exceed expectations and stuff like that. So lots and lots of sources of stress and pressure. These, again, they're going to vary from time to time. Sometimes people are going to find that it is sort of, their family or their living situation is causing stress. Other times it might be more worldly factors, or it could be the job itself. So huge variety. And the key is really to identify where does your main source of stress come from. So finding out the source of the stress. There's no single magic cure for stress. There isn't any quick fix solution to this. The key to dealing with any sort of stress and pressure is really identifying where it's come from so that you can deal with it effectively. So that's all the different sources of stress. What makes you stressed, though? So if I was going to ask you what makes you stressed, could you list down, maybe sort of the top 5 things that make you stressed? Pausing and reflecting, what is it about those situations that's making you stressed as well? And is there something that you can actually do about being stressed? Because we are all so totally different. What makes one person feel very stressed could be exciting to somebody else. It could be water off a duck's back to somebody else, totally differently. So there isn't one situation which is sort of global that makes everyone stressed. But there are a couple of factors that sources of stress have in common with each other. So the kind of typical things that are going to make us feel more stressed is when we're caring about something. So one of the factors is when we're trying to protect a loved one, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, if it's something that we really care and we really value, we're going to have, possibly have it as a source of stress. So that's why, if people are not being able to meet their mortgage payments, meet their rent payments, pay the bills, if they're at risk of losing their job, this is going to be a massive source of stress then, because, it's something which is important. They need to look after these things. We get worried about friends and family because we love them and we care for them. The more that we care about our job and the people that we're looking after, the more potential it has for us to feel stressed about it. The other factor in terms of feeling stressed is if we feel that we're going to be judged negatively. If we feel that we're going to be judged, criticised, viewed in any way, that can be a source of stress for us. So that might explain why going for interviews or presentations or public speaking can be incredibly stressful for people, because we're putting ourselves on show. People are going to see us, they're going to have a comment, in particular with social media. The world and his wife can comment on things now. So being judged, being criticised, being sort of, putting your head above the parapet, it's a common source of stress. And the third one is when we can't control something. So if a situation is beyond our control or beyond our abilities, we're going to feel stressed. That, for example, could explain public transport. So if you're stuck on a on a plane or train, not that we are the current times, but if you're stuck on transport where you can't get somewhere and there's nothing you can do about it, it's going to be incredibly stressful. If there's time frames, if there's deadlines, if there's expectations that you can't push back on, it's going to be stressful because you've got no other way of dealing with it. So the three factors that can cause us the most stress are things that we care about, so the things that are really important to us and are valuable. Second one is if we're going to be judged or feel that we perhaps could be judged or criticised or perceived as negatively. And the third one is things which are out of our control. So if you're trying to identify why you're feeling stressed about a situation, it's probably because it's ticking one of those three boxes. And why do we sometimes feel that we're dealing with loads of pressure and we're thriving, we're in the zone, we're in the flow, we're we're coping with loads of stuff, we've got energy, we're being decisive, we're coming up with ideas and solutions. Other times we can feel that we're absolutely drained. Well, one of the ways of showing this is to think about our stress in terms of a stress bucket. We have stuff that flows into what we call our stress bucket or our stress container on a regular basis. This could be stuff that we're dealing with day-to-day basis, whether it's trying to get all the family out of the house in the morning, dealing with the commute, dealing with just stuff, big, little, whatever flows into our bucket. We have the tap at the bottom of the bucket, and this is what we can do to deal with the stress. So if we're doing stuff that's really healthy, really positive, and helping us cope with the stress, it stops the bucket of stress from overflowing. There are other coping mechanisms that people look to do when they're under stressful situations. They could be drinking, drugs, gambling, smoking, all of those kind of things. So what we're ideally looking for is the positive, healthy coping habits that we can do when we're feeling stressed. And the key is to try and stop our stress bucket from overflowing, because that's when we start to get irritable, snappy, don't feel that we can deal effectively with the situations. We talk about the emotional snapping. So this is when people get very, very irritable. They're snapping. They haven't got the patience. They haven't got the tolerance for dealing with the little things in life. So just thinking about your own stress bucket. And I think it can also help us be more empathetic to other people, because we don't know what else is going on in other people's stress buckets or stress containers. We can't tell from the outside what people are dealing with in their lives. So just kind of knowing that their stress bucket might be overflowing can sometimes, help us be a bit more tolerant, I guess. Not always, but sometimes. One of the other things about handling stress is knowing your stress signature, as we like to call it. So what are the signs and the symptoms going on that might indicate to you that you're not coping with things quite as well as you'd like to do? So what are the signs, what are the symptoms that just give you an indication that when you think about the mental health spectrum, what is it that suggests to you that you're going from healthy to coping to struggling to really not feeling too great? There's a whole variety of things. And again, in the same way that we all have different sources of stress, we all have different stress triggers. I certainly know what would make me feel incredibly stressed would be karaoke or any public singing whatsoever. Just the thought of that would make me feel incredibly stressed. But, other people pay good money and enjoy it and do it for fun. So each to their own. And in the same sort of vein as that, there's various different signs that we can look out for that can indicate to us that we're beginning not to cope as efficiently or effectively as we might want to be. Some of those in the yellow circle, as you can see, it might be more physical things. So people often say that they get headaches, or they just, because their immune system is suppressed, they get lots of infections, or sore throats, coughs, colds, whatever. Muscle aches and twitches, if they've got lots of adrenaline and cortisol running around their bodies. Breathlessness, and the skin irritations. Quite a lot of people say that they get eczema flare-ups, or problems with their skin if they're feeling particularly stressed, and fatigue, because our brains are just trying so hard to sort of, try and deal with the situation, try and come up with the solutions, but we're probably not sleeping very well either. So, those two coupled together aren't going to be very good for trying to get through a stressful situation. Some of the other symptoms in the sort of like the pinky, purpley, lilac coloured circle might be more sort of thoughts and stuff like that in our minds. So we might be worrying about things more. We might get things out of perspective. Very muddled thinking. So this is when we just can't think straight. We can't think logically. Our brains are sort of jumping all over the place. Our judgment can be very impaired as well. We might not be making the most rational, sensible decisions that we'd normally make. That's if we're making a decision at all. So some people say that they become very indecisive. They can't come to a conclusion or a decision, or they become very hasty and just want to make a quick decision to go away. We might notice that we feel very negative. So again, this is the whole kind of, pessimistic sort of, tone and outlook starts overtaking us as well. And this could also manifest itself in odd dreams or nightmares. Some of the more emotional things in the green coloured circle is where we might feel more fussy, losing confidence in our abilities. So again, it then becomes a bit of a vicious circle. If you're feeling stressed, you can't make a decision, then you lose confidence. It's going to sort of undermine that. Irritability, sort of depression, and apathy. Just kind of giving up a bit and losing sort of interest and stuff like that, and sort of switching off. Some of the other ones, more personal things, low libido, accident prone, loss of appetite, drinking, smoking, eating more or the wrong things, and insomnia. So there's various signs and symptoms to look out for. The key thing is to know what is your stress signature. What are your signs that are personal to you that you think, actually, this is a sign to me that things are building up, they're getting on top of me, and I need to do something about it sooner rather than later to be able to bounce back. So one of the questions, I guess, is coming back to why is it that sometimes we can feel that we're absolutely thriving under pressure, but not so much when it gets to a stressful situation. So if I share this diagram, so this is what we call the pressure and stress curve, and it's often used in sports psychology to help sports people and athletes deal with the pressures of performing in professional championships, etc. So what this shows to us is that as the pressure on us increases, our performance increases. So you can see the arrows on the axes there, both going along. So if we don't have enough pressure on us, we can actually be quite bored. If we don't have enough of a deadline or engagement or motivation, we can actually feel sort of quite lethargic. So we do need a little bit of pressure to motivate us, to engage us. And when we get about the right amount of pressure, that's where we get to the peak of our performance curve. That's where we get to the optimum performance. That's when we're very clear in terms of the expectations, the outcomes, the deadlines, the pressures. We feel that ultimately we can do it. It might take a bit of extra effort, but ultimately we feel that we can actually achieve what's expected of us and we can do it to the best of our abilities. And this is ideally where we're looking for people to perform. This is where we want our sports people, our footballers, our athletic people to be performing. This is where they're going to be winning the championships, the competitions, the medals, etc. This is their peak performance in sports. So if they're on the bench, they're going to be in the low pressure and the boredom. They're not going to be at the peak of their physical fitness. But if we start going over and beyond the optimum performance, this is where we get into the stress zones. This is where people become very stressed, very anxious, and the performance, as you can see there, starts to go down again. If we had people in the sports world who are going beyond their optimum performance, this is when they're overtraining, they're working too hard, they're training too much, and they're going to be more prone to injuries, they're going to be more prone to exhaustion, and they're not going to be winning, they're not going to be at the peak of their physical fitness and performance. So it's worth just taking a moment just to think, whereabouts are you on the pressure and stress curve? Are you sort of gearing towards the optimum performance, and what are the factors that help you? work at your best, or are you in the sort of the high stress anxiety part, and you need to sort of do something to get back to the better performance? So how can we do that? So how can we sort of better handle pressure and stress to keep us in that optimum performance? Well, I guess this kind of like ties in with resilience. Resilience is all about sort of coping with setbacks and challenges and adversities, and we're dealing with stuff on a daily basis. And there was a research done by Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago, and they were looking at what are the common kind of things that test our resilience levels. And the researchers, they kind of expected the big stuff, the divorce, the moving house, the weddings, the bereavements, those kind of things. But actually, in their research, they were very surprised to find that people cited the smaller things on a regular basis as the things that kind of depleted our resilience levels and sort of made us not being able to cope with pressure and stress. And these were things like negative feedback, toxic relationships, either in work or outside of work, and just an overload, so the email overload, just too many demands, too many pressures, not the big stuff, but just the cumulative effect of lots and lots of little things. So the key thing is really to think about how we respond to pressure and stress, and what are your resources that you can do to cope with it, to build up your resilience levels. And I'm just going to show you this slide here about building resilience. So there's lots of things that we can have in place to help us build up our resilience levels, to help us deal better with pressures and stresses on a daily basis. One of those at the top there is trying to develop a positive mindset to help us deal with the stuff, trying to look for the positive in things. And this can easily be done to sort of to flex your mind. Our minds are sort of neuroplastic. We can build new habits, new mindsets in it. It's trying to sort of focus on 3 good things every single day. And I know that sounds a little bit airy-fairy. It's something which I've shared with my clients, and I was, a bit reticent to for a long time. But the feedback from people has been absolutely amazing. They've said, actually, it's just training your mind to focus on the positive. We're so quick at dismissing or discounting the good stuff that happens, the positive feedback. We have this negative bias as humans. Again, it's our safety mechanism to keep us safe, but actually focusing on some of the positives can make a world of difference. Focusing on what you can control, where is your energy being placed? Are you really focusing time, attention, energies on things that you can control, things that you can influence, or is too much being spent on the stuff which is just out of our control and we've got no influence over? Visualization, so sort of looking to the future. This can be sort of daydreaming, planning, stuff like this. But actually, sort of trying to formulate a plan and a vision in your mind can help. Anxiety control is really important to sort of deal with the stress hormones, the sort of the excess sort of energies that you might have. So sort of dealing with anxieties, thought patterns, negative thinking errors, and stuff like that is hugely important. And relaxation techniques as well. So being able to switch off, to relax, to recharge, to recuperate. And again, thinking about the parity with physical health and athletes, any sort of athletes or sports person values their rest days as much as their training days. They need their physical health to recharge and recuperate and mend. We need to do exactly the same with our mental health. We only have so much mental energy. We can't keep going on infinitely. We have to sort of stop, have boundaries, take time out and do something else. And as humans, tracking success is really vital for us. We're so quick to go from A to B to C to D that we forget sometimes to pause and to look back and think, well, where have I come from? Notice, how much you've learned, developed and grown. There's also some great work by positive psychologists. This is by Martin Seligman, who looks at resilience. And in terms of building a resilient mindset to deal with stuff, he talks about the 3 Ps that can help build up our resilience. So Those are not taking things personally. We don't need to be personally responsible for everything. It's not always our fault. Things aren't permanent, so, again, thinking about the coronavirus at the moment, it's worth really remembering, this isn't going to be like this forever. Things are going to change. We're not going to be in lockdown situation permanently. And also things aren't pervasive, so just because things are, difficult in one part of our lives doesn't mean that everything in all of the other parts of our lives need to be affected as well. So quite often when we're in a sort of negative stress state, everything can seem bad and overwhelming. If we're not very good at one particular aspect of our job, it doesn't mean to say that there's other aspects of our job or our life that we're not good at. We can be great in other things as well. And some of the ways of building up resilience can be to gain perspective, trying to get a new perspective on the situation. And, I accept that this can be really difficult when you're in the thick of things, trying to get that sort of perspective. So this is where sometimes having a chat with someone else can give you a different insight into things. But if you're dealing with stuff, just have a think for a moment on a scale of 1 to 100. How really stressful or important is this situation right now? If 1 is kind of, absolutely doesn't matter, doesn't make any difference, and 100 is absolutely sort of, awful, life-changing stuff that you have to deal with straight away, get a bit of perspective on a scale. Or think of the situation and how much it will matter in, X number of days, weeks, months' time. This can really help in terms of the resilience and sort of, not getting that sort of a permanent stuck state that isn't helpful for us to be in. Sometimes people think, would they gamble their own situation for another one in the world? So if everyone put in their own stresses into a circle and they had to take something else back without knowing what it might be, how difficult is this to be in sort of comparison to perhaps other people? Sometimes the stuff that we've got going on we take for granted until we actually sort of think about others around us. And the final one there on the screen, which is one which I absolutely love, this is actually from Cher when she was doing some promotion for the Mamma Mia 2 film that came out a year or so ago. And I think it was Graham Norton asked her the question, how does she how has she sort of coped with having such a long career in show business? And she said her mantra is that if it doesn't matter in 5 years' time, it doesn't matter, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. For me, this is probably like one of the ones that works the best. If you're getting really stressed about something, just pausing to think, actually, what, is this really going to matter that much in 5 years' time? And it can just help, just giving a little bit of perspective to deal with it. And coming back to the control thing, so thinking about, your situation, what you're dealing with, have a look at it in terms of this control and influence circle. Is it something that you can do, that you can deal with, that's in your control? Is there something to do with the situation that you can influence, even if it's not directly within your control? Or is it something that is totally out of your control that you can't do anything about at all? So just sort of, try and think, whereabouts, are you directing your energies? Are you using your mental energies in the best possible way? And this is it for this short session. So thinking about sort of pressure and stress. So I hope that's been helpful for you. Please drop me a line via Twitter, LinkedIn, contact details are there as well. If there's any sort of further questions, any comments, I would love to find out from you and hear your thoughts. Any top tips that you want to share as well would be also great to hear as well. I don't have all the answers. Other people can also share other stuff that they find that works for them in dealing with pressure and stress as well. So please let me know and share your ideas and be in touch. And thank you so much for listening to this. I really hope it's been helpful for you. Please be in touch. Let me know how you're getting on. Best of luck with handling pressure and stress. It's not going to go away, but there's loads of things, resources that you can do to build up your resilience to deal with it. So yeah, take care. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.